I'm Richie923 and I'm on Geek Status. And tonight I would like to formally introduce you to the toy exhibit. So this is my personal collection of vintage and modern screen-accurate toys, officially licensed props, and fan-made replicas. It's a museum of my childhood all up until now. I'm a kid of the late 80s and early 90s, so just a little bit too young for Transformers, He-Man, Thundercats, shows like that. So as you can see, there are some major players here. Back to the Future, Ghostbusters, Star Wars, and just a little bit of Power Rangers stuff. Just kidding. Power Rangers is a huge chunk of it. It has its own section. I call it the Morphin Grid. I'll go over that in full detail in a part 2. But for this section, I call it Screen Icons. Get it? A little bit of a pun there. I love the movies. All throughout my childhood, my parents would buy me toys, and I would always favor the ones that I see on TV rather than just toys for being toys. My little obsession for screen accuracy started coming into play. Like, if it wasn't on the screen, I didn't want it, It wasn't until I got serious about toy collecting where I started managing a display of some sort. So had humble beginnings, and over time I was able to utilize like bigger shelves, glass cases. Recently my wife and I just bought a house, and I have a whole downstairs that I get to have as a huge canvas. Just slowly, while building the collection, I got a chance to put some artistic integrity behind it. I got a chance to separate toys by their different eras. You get to kind of see over time, like, what's the term? Zeitgeist? You get to kind of see the zeitgeist of certain eras. And then also about perspective, I'm making use of the fact that someone's going to be at eye level looking down on the collection. I get to kind of play around with that because for instance, the Willy Wonka ticket, like, you have to actually go and find it, so you got to find the golden ticket. I get to explore like different parallels or forced perspective on things, and also I want to be able to kind of tell a story with it. And yeah, let's get started. Back to the Future is a huge universe already, so my main focus was Back to the Future Part 2, specifically the first 20 minutes. They travel to the year 2015. For me, that will always be the pinnacle of movie magic. So surprisingly, growing up, there was not a lot of Back to the Future merchandise. The only thing I had were these Micro Machine looking things. And for figures, I actually made my own, which is pretty funny. These Mini-Mates look exactly like these bubble-shaped figures that I would kind of color and then cut out, and they would look pretty much just like these. And I drew every character, every iteration of that character. And then we have the Desirables from 2015. I would wear out the VHS copy of Back to the Future 2 watching Marty always putting on those shoes, the hoverboard chase scene, and just playing around with the jacket. So having official versions of these on display is like my childhood dream come true. And then let's move on to Ghostbusters. I was a fan of both real Ghostbusters and the movies, but just for the sake of this exhibit, I'm going to focus just on the movies. And here I'm able to show both Ghostbusters 1 and Ghostbusters 2. And here's where I get a chance to play with forced perspective and some sort of symmetry. And then of course the Ghostbuster gear and its origins. Those are the same ones I had as a kid. Just truly awesome to have those out in the open rather than behind glass. So that way, that just gives it a little bit more realism when it's not behind glass for me. And then just growing up in the 80s, I'm gonna call this exhibit 80s Excellent Adventures. This section explores the adventurous side of the 80s, whether you're time traveling, learning karate, or going into a land of make-believe. There's even deep cuts like Teeny Little Super Guy, Spaceballs. I'm gonna have to say that's my first and favorite sci-fi movie of all time. Having a Schwartz ring is more important than having a lightsaber. Here's where I'd kind of like to say I collect key items from movies, like the Zamunda coin. In the film, that was their deciding factor of where to go, so it's cool to have important, I'll call them artifacts of cinema like that. And then we get into the weird side of the 80s, so I call this section the 80s oddities. And for me, that was Beetlejuice, Gremlins, Little Shop of Horrors. And I kind of cheat a little bit because Thing is more 90s. And I know that's not a Seymour Krelborn figure, that's Louis Tully from Ghostbusters, but that's my little Rick Moranis tribute. Rick Moranis played a huge part of my childhood, you know? We had Spaceballs, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, Ghostbusters, and Little Shop of Horrors. Thank you, Rick Moranis. And then as we move on, the general direction is just kind of going outward. So, you know, we can start in the early 90s. This is when it was more than just watching TV. Like, I was an older kid now. I was able to go out and watch movies in the theater. So I call this Action Heroes of the 90s. So I reinforced that by having the last action hero be the front and center. So everything behind that ticket, you're in movie land. And a tribute to Arnold Schwarzenegger, #1 action star. And the toy companies were big on this too. They wanted you to watch the movie and go home with a literal handful of your heroes. So in this exhibit, you will have the vintage figures of the 90s with a modern prop replica from that movie. I want to give a personal shout out to Rock 3D Studio and Innate Creativity for doing a cross collaboration with me and creating the TGRI bottle. And then we move on to the mid 90s. This entire section right here is called Relics of the 90s. And here are iconic life-size props and toys from some very awesome movies. And then here's where I get a chance to play with perspective, because if you see the Wayne's World hat, in Wayne's World stars Mike Myers, which leads to Halloween. This is what I call favorite nightmares. This is where we're all rooting for the villain. Why do we do that? You know, it's fun. You know, they make horror fun. So these are my top 4 favorite nightmares. And I love the composition of this one. It almost looks like they're trying to escape out of the box, you know? And then we can go to a galaxy far, far away in Star Wars: A New Hope. Again, getting a chance to play with force perspective, so I made use of the micro machines in the back and our entire cast of characters to introduce us right in the front, and the Star Wars action fleet up in the middle there. And I'm trying to recreate the Death Star chase. Like I said, the universe of Star Wars is huge. And here I have some life-size roleplay items to kind of show the expanding world of Star Wars. So, and here we have a almost life-size BB-8. And making use of this hook, I was able to hang a Jedi training ball, or what do we call those? Jedi training sphere. And then, without Star Wars, you can't not talk about Star Trek. I was introduced to Star Trek first growing up, and then Star Wars. So the two are kind of side by side here. But I did also want to honor Galaxy Quest, trying to kind of represent the meta narrative here. But, you know, the theme here is communicator, phaser, captain, and the starship. And then we enter Invasions of the late 90s. And this one I had fun trying to name. I tried to take a look at what was happening in all the movies of the late 90s. And, you know, stuff like alien invasions, asteroids, secret aliens in the world, or out and about. Like, things were out to get us, you know. So I call this Invasions of the late 90s. And of course, in the middle, we have a little bit of levity with Austin Powers. You know, he's facing the same kind of action and danger, except he's doing it in a funny way. So here's where I get a chance to kind of make fun of that. And then we move on to Heroes versus Villains 2000. It was originally going to be called Heroes and Villains Reborn. I mean, because they do feature a lot of rebooted characters and properties. So we got, you know, the new Batman, the new Transformers, the new Spider-Man. Here I was trying to show the split, and then Spider-Man trying to hold it together. And then if you look at Batman, it's the same theme of Batman with his Batarang and his Batmobile. And then leading us into the modern day superhero era, showcasing the Avengers all the way up to hinting at what happens in Endgame. And it just so happens that I built an exhibit of heroes next to an exhibit of villains. So I play around with symmetry there, with Iron Man's glove and Freddy's claw. And then of course on the other side we have the Morphin Grid, the Power Rangers exhibit. I'll go over that in a part 2. But watching that show led me to this next section, Kamen Rider 5s, or Kamen Rider 555. So this is a Japanese superhero series. To me, he just had like the best gadgets, the coolest gear, you know, and they went all out on the toys. They made the briefcase, They made nice adult collector size ones, so that was a fun series to watch. And I had to have the toys for that one. That was so cool. So that's a look at my toy exhibit. It's a pretty awesome feeling to be able to display a lot of things like this. I feel like you take a snapshot into my personality. Being able to have it on display is a pretty cool and still inspiring thing for me. So I'm lucky and grateful to be able to have something like this. And it's just cool to be able to bring that movie magic to life. That's it. See you for part 2, the Morphin Grid. I'm Richie923. I'm on Geek Status. And remember, own your passion.